So how do you actually negotiate with a potential customer? Say the customer is saying, I'm not going to pay your price, or I don't have the money. How do you do negotiation? How do you negotiate the best price? How do you negotiate the best terms? How do you handle objection handling, right? If a customer has an objection and says, we can't buy because of XYZ, how do you handle that? And how do you actually close a deal? In this episode, we're going to find out about all of that. So here we go. Negotiation, objection handling, and closing. So a lot of reps think that they're the hero in the story, right? A lot of sales guys, account executives, they just think I'm the hero in the story. But the truth is you are not, right? So if you look at this circle on the left, it's called the hero's journey. It's a story that's been told many, many times. All stories follow this pattern. So there's somebody, they have a call to adventure, they want to go out and adventure, and then, they start the adventure, and then they do a lot of trials. There's a road of trials where, they go through, different difficulties, and then they reach a place called abyss. Abyss means, they're locked somewhere, and, it's their worst period, and they're going through their worst time ever, and then suddenly they transform as people, right? And they learn the right way to do the world and all of that. And then they get something called the ultimate boon. So somebody from outside comes, gives them a gift. They take the gift, and then, they exit the adventure, they finish it, they go back with their trials, and then they return the boon and give it to somebody else. Most people think that they are the adventurer. Most reps, most sales executives, they think that they are the adventurer. They are the ones that are going through this journey. And, in a way, everybody goes through this journey. But when you're in a sales meeting and you're trying to close a deal, if you're an account executive and you're trying to close this, that is not you. You are the person who gives the actual adventurer a boon. And the actual adventurer in this case is the decision maker in the company, right? You play a small part in their story. This is not your story. And that's the right way to look at this, right? So talk to the right people. That's I think step number one when you're negotiating. If you're negotiating with somebody who doesn't have any decision making power, you're wasting your time. In companies, like I mentioned before, it's not the entire company that makes a decision. It's like a few people at the top. Government employees and lower level employees of companies will waste your time 100%, right? So they don't have any decision making capabilities and they're slow. Talk return on investment, right? It has to make financial sense for the customer and they have to see a return. People are not just going to try your product for fun. You might think, oh, this person didn't try my product. A lot of people come to Avalon and say, hey, try my product. And we are not going to do it unless it makes sense to us or unless, we have an actual need for it, because we're not going to waste our time. Every second of our time is important. We could die as a company if we get defocused by doing all of this, right? So most companies are focused and it has to make ROI. It has to give them, if they make an investment on the product, whether it's time or money, it has to give them something. Be upfront about your margins. Now, just be upfront about your margins. Don't lie about, I make nothing on this deal, right? And this is not for everybody. You don't have to be upfront about your margins all the time. So if you make 1 lakh of the deal and you're telling the customer, no, I'm making nothing of the deal, please don't negotiate anymore, the customer will eventually figure it out, right? Most people are not stupid and it just hurts your relationship. You won't get a repeat customer. And one of the cool things about sales is repeat customers can actually just pay for your entire quota the next year, right? So just be smart. Know your bottom line, which is how much everything costs to you, so that you know your negotiation buffer. If you know the cost of giving a service to a client is 5 lakhs, then at least make sure you make 6 lakhs or 5.5 lakhs and know that buffer, know the difference. If a client says, no, the final price I'm going in is 4.9 lakhs, walk away. You have to be able to walk away. That's one of the best things about negotiation is if you have the ability to walk away, you will be able to walk away. In fact, I'm writing a book entirely on negotiations, which you guys should check out. It'll be out in a bit. And get the entire buying committee involved. Remember, it's more complicated now because it's not one adventurer, it's a group of adventurers, right? So you have to convince all of them. Try to get the entire team in one room. It's easier that way. Remember, and I'm going to remind you this again, you are not the hero. The prospect is the hero. You are the guide and it is their story. You're just the person who gives them some boon, some help, some product or service that makes their life easier so that they continue going through their trials. So, how do you handle objections? And there are many, many objections. These are concerns that prospects have. Some of these are legit. Some of these are random stuff. I thought, let me go through an entire list of objections and how you handle them. But, HubSpot has a very, very good document on this. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So just click on that link, download the deck. You can pay for it. So download the deck. I think this resource is free. So download the deck, click on this link, and then just go through all the common sales objections. They have responses for all of them. If a client says it's too expensive, or there's no money, or we don't have budget, or it's not important right now, you can handle all of those objections. Just you got to be smart about it. So how do you close a deal? When is it done? When can you breathe a sigh of relief and go out and have some fun? The deal isn't closed until the decision maker signs on the dotted line. And in the early days of my career, I always thought just because someone said they'll buy or they'll invest, it means they're being true about it. 90% of the time, that's when a person disappears. Yeah, I'll buy. I'm 100% sure I'll buy. And then the next day they don't show up. Maybe they're busy or they don't need it anymore, right? Or you're not that important. So until the deal, the decision maker signs the deal, it is not over. It is not closed. Most enterprise companies have something called procurement teams that have to sign off on a purchase. So I'll tell you how this works, right? If you're selling to a small startup with 10 employees, then usually it's the founder that makes a decision. He or she says, okay, I'll pay. Whereas if you go to an IBM and you want them to make a purchase, it really depends on what you're selling them. If you're selling something that costs less than 10,000 rupees a month, then, and if it's maybe say one small sales rep that's using your tool somewhere in IBM, they can just pay on the credit card, right? Companies, each VP usually has a credit card that they can use, and it's easy, right? And these are usually refundable. So the employee, so they make credit card purchases which are refundable. So if an employee really needs a tool, he can use his or her own credit card and tell the company, listen, I had to buy this. Can you refund me later? So it's usually refundable. Whereas when it comes to, if you're selling a $100,000 deal, then IBM has to go through many different processes. First, the decision makers get involved and they say, okay, we're buying this. Then the deal goes to something called a procurement team. The procurement team is responsible for all the software licenses that a company has, and they're the ones that go and get the money from the finance team and give it to you after doing checks on whether this decision is actually being taken smartly. Because you have to understand, there are a lot of people in IBM or any large company for that matter who just want to make some money off their friends. So they have friends outside who are selling these people products, and these people say, yeah, I'll buy the product, and then they send it to the procurement team. The procurement team is there to make sure these sort of things don't happen, that the tool being bought or used is actually valuable to the company, that the finance team can actually pay that off, that it makes sense for all the teams involved. That's what the procurement team does. So it's two teams that are involved, the decision-making team and then the procurement team, especially at the enterprise level. Software and goods above that cost, above the 10,000 INR cost, need to hit the procurement team, which is a long process and requires a lot of follow-up. Enterprise deals can take up to 2 years to close, by which time your point of contact could have left. So say you were selling to Rajesh Khanna, who is the VP of sales at, Microsoft. After 2 years, you're going back and forth negotiating, the procurement team is involved. After 2 years, Rajesh Khanna might have left the company. He might have gone somewhere else, right? So that can happen a lot. You might just think, I wasted 2 years on this deal. But if it works out, you make $100,000, and that usually is a long-term contract, 3 or 4 years at least. So there's pluses and minuses. It's better to have an enterprise deal which is long, stable, and high value, long contract, than a small company deal which is short, unstable, and low value. I used to think that selling to startups is fun. Like it's the best place to be. Why is nobody selling to startups? With JobSpy, we started out being a startup job platform, and then we evolved into working with bigger companies. But when we were when we worked with smaller companies, we realized that they just run out of money very quickly, right? They don't survive for more than 3 or 4 months. So don't sell to startups. It's dumb. It's not a very smart idea unless, it's something where you don't mind losing your clients every 3 months. You have that high volume. But I don't think you shouldn't be selling to startups. You should avoid that. And if you sell to startups, sell to the startups that you think will succeed. You have to think like a venture capital investor, because when you invest time and energy building products for these startups, they need to grow with you, right? And 2 years later, if they change if they just stop using you and you start using your competitor, then you just wasted your time. That happens all the time. And don't lose steam as a rep until you finish the close and money hits the account. If you look at most top sales companies in the US, right, and you look at who they're selling to, unless they're an AWS or an IBM Bluemix or a Google Cloud, unless they're selling cloud solutions or something that scales as the startup scales, where the startup can't shift, unless they're selling something like that, they rarely sell to startups. Their accounts, their tier 1, tier 2 accounts do not have startups in them, right? So try to avoid selling to small startups. And by startup, I'm talking about small startups. If a startup is Series B, then it's, you can say that the startup has enough money to afford you and they will be around at least for 2-3 years. But don't sell to small 2 or 3 man companies. That's going nowhere, right? So that's it for this video. Catch you on the next.